How sex drives evolution. Since the dawn of time, creationists could not explain how a supernatural designer could produce multiple sexes with distinct features found in one sex and not the other. Darwin hypothesized that traits in regards to males and females within a species, elaborate behaviors, structures, and ornaments are almost always restricted to males. Essentially, pointless traits evolve through a mechanism of selection, which isn't dependent on surviving into old age, but rather through the process of successfully being able to reproduce. In other words, flamboyant traits and behaviors don't help an individual survive, but instead increase its fitness through offspring, which continue to pass on traits or behaviors. Sexual selection, also known as sexual dimorphism, is the differences in appearance between males and females of the same species, such as color, shape, size, and structure, that are caused by the inheritance of one or other sexual patterns in the genetic material. Selected traits evolve if there are more apparent in a population. Sexual selection exists in two forms. First, through direct competition between males for access to females. This type of selection favors any trait that promotes victory amongst competitors as long as the increased chances of securing more mates offsets the reduced survival. In other words, long-term survival isn't as important in regards to sexual selection as reproducing and generating offspring with the mate is. Over time, this type of selection favors stronger weapons, larger body size, and anything that helps a male win a physical contest. Various venues of empirical evidence have suggested that the strongest, massive, and overall most dominant males tend to outcompete other males in regards to mates. An extreme example of sexual dimorphism occurs amongst the North elephant seal. In this polygamous species, over a third of males reproduce with the entire population of females, thus dooming the rest of males to a life of single bachelorhood, where their genes are not passed on to the next generation. The competition amongst males for mates is fierce and deadly for the opportunity to reproduce. Most offspring is fertilized by a number of few males. Bigger males tend to leave the most offspring. The second form of sexual selection favors features which females are attracted to, things such as bright colors, ornaments, bowers, and various other forms of mating displays. Because the gene pool of a population is filled with random traits which females ultimately find attractive, certain useless male traits and behaviors are ultimately passed down. The process of female selection is still a largely unknown entity due to the multiple variables at play. Amongst males, there is also indirect competition, where males compete through bright colors, loud and masculine voices, alluring pheromones, and various other sexual displays. Numerous male species indirectly compete through guarding against paternity. Various male species have offensive weapons which get rid of sperm. One clever device is the penis scoop of some damsel flies. When a male mates with an already mated female, he uses a backward pointing spine on his penis to scoop out sperm of an earlier mating male. Only after she's been dispermed does he transfer his own sperm. In Drosophila, a male's ejaculate contains substances that inactivate the stored sperm of males who previously mated.
Individuals who reproduce sexually lose half of their genetic information to the next generation compared to those who reproduce asexually. So then why did sex evolve? The answer to this question likely lies in the act of random gene shuffling that occurs in sexual reproduction. The genetic lottery produces new combinations of genes that allow the production to adapt alongside changes in its environment. But if sexual reproduction confers an advantage, then why are there only two sexes? Why not more? Why not 3 or 4? Examples do exist. For instance, in certain harvester ants there are effectively 3 sexes or 3 distinct gamete types. The queen must get sperm from one type of male to produce worker ants and another to produce future queens. But studies have shown that the 2 sexes will evolutionarily replace systems involving 3 or more. But why do the number and size of gametes differ so drastically? Mathematical models show favorability in conditions in which one sex makes a larger number of small gametes and the other makes a small number of large gametes. We see this in sperm and eggs. To quote biologist Brian Charlesworth of the University of Edinburgh, anything in between would be at a selective disadvantage. The discrepancies in gamete size are the determining factor for individual mating strategies. Males continuously produce large amounts of sperm throughout their lifetime. We are capable of fathering large numbers of offspring. Genghis Khan is said to have had hundreds of children. According to an article in Nature magazine, millions of men bear his genetic legacy. Eggs, on the other hand, are produced far fewer in number and are metabolically expensive. So is pregnancy and the subsequent raising of those offspring. Females simply have to invest more. The divide between gametes and the degree of the investment determines the mating tactic. Males have nothing to lose, and so they spread their seed in as many directions as they can, including with mates that might otherwise be substandard in terms of fitness. Selection favors promiscuity in males. But females can afford to be choosy. In fact, they have to be. Given a limited number of eggs, they have to make the best of every mating opportunity, which means choosing the best mate. This juxtaposition establishes a system in which males must compete for the chance to mate with a female. This is evidenced by variant studies in which the variation of the number of offspring is higher in males than it is in females. In short, fitter males are allowed more mating opportunities. We also see sexual dimorphisms in socially monogamous species, those that are monogamous in their interactions but less so in practice. Mates in socially monogamous species may spend their entire adult lives bonded to each other. They may split up the job of caring for their young or each help to defend their territory. However, adultery in these populations is common. Females will mate with other males more often than they do with their social mate. This behavior is common in birds. Sexual selection theory actually allows us to make predictions based upon the physical characteristics observed in a given population. If one sex has defining characteristics like large antlers or puts on an elaborate display for a mate, then it can be assumed that competition among potential mates is high. Species that show fewer characteristic differences between sexes will appear to be more monogamous. This is true of geese, penguins, and pigeons, to name only a few. We haven't yet covered the one topic of primary concern. What about promiscuous females? Most examples we see in the wild involve the male pursuing multiple females. In some species, males can, in effect, become pregnant. The female will produce the eggs, but the male will place them in a pouch, carrying them until they eventually hatch. But these males can only carry a certain amount of eggs, and it takes longer for the eggs in the oven to hatch than it does for the females to produce new ones. If that sounds familiar, it should. In cases like this, it's the females that must expend a considerable amount of metabolic energy to make an impression on potential mates.
Normal mate choice is when females are the ones choosing a mate. Alfred Russel Wallace's hypothesis was that females were less colorful than males because they needed to be camouflaged from predators, while the bright colors and ornaments of males were byproducts of their physiology. Darwin's hypothesis was that male colors and ornaments evolved via female choice. Also, Darwin saw no reason why females should choose things like elaborate songs or long tails unless they found them intrinsically appealing. A female can benefit two ways by choosing a particular mate. She can benefit directly, that is, by picking a male who will help her produce more or healthier young during the act of childcare. She can benefit indirectly by choosing a male who has better genes than those of other males. A gene that tells a female to mate with males holding better territories gives her offspring who are better nourished or occupy better nests. This means that the population of young will contain a higher proportion of females carrying the preference gene than it did in the previous generation. And if there are mutations that increase preference for better territories, those too will increase in frequency. Over time, the preference for males with better territories will evolve to be stronger and stronger. And this in turn selects on males to compete more strongly for territories. Genes that give indirect benefits to choosy females will also spread. Imagine that a male has genes that make him more resistant than other males to disease. A female who mates with such a male will have offspring that are also more disease resistant. Now imagine that as well there is a gene that enables females to identify these healthier males as mates. If she mates with such a male, that mating will produce sons and daughters who carry both types of genes, those for disease resistance as well as those preferring males with disease resistance. The most disease-resistant individuals who reproduce better will also carry genes that tell females to choose the most resistant males. As those resistant genes spread by natural selection, the genes for female preference piggyback along with them. Direct and indirect benefits explain why females prefer certain types of males, but not why they prefer certain features such as bright colors or elaborate plumage. The house finch of North America is sexually dimorphic for color. Females are brown and males have bright colors on their head and breasts. Geoff Hill conducted an experiment wanting to see if color affected reproductive success. Brighter males obtain significantly more mates than paler ones. Hill showed that brighter males feed their young more often than do lighter males. Females thus get a direct benefit in the form of better provisioning of their offspring by choosing brighter males. Evolutionary theory shows that females should prefer any trait showing that a male will be a good father. In sage grouse, parasitic lice produce spots of blood on the male's vocal sac. Males who have blood on the vocal sac get significantly fewer mates because the spots may tip off females that a male is infested and would literally be a lousy father. Selection will favor genes that promote not only the female preference for unspotted sacs, but also the male traits that indicate his condition. The male's vocal sac will get bigger and the female's preference for plain vocal sac will increase. This can lead to the evolution of highly exaggerated features in males. Males with brighter colors, longer tails, or louder calls may be able to display these features only if they have genes that make them survive or reproduce better than their competitors. Evolutionary theory shows that in these cases, 3 types of genes will all increase in frequency together. Genes for a male indicator trait, reflecting that he has good genes, genes that make a female prefer that indicator trait, and of course the good genes whose presence is reflected by the indicator. Allison Welch and her colleagues at the University of Missouri conducted a test of the good genes model using gray tree frogs. Male frogs attract females by giving loud calls, and females prefer males whose calls are longer. To test whether those males had better genes, researchers stripped eggs from different females, fertilizing half of each female's eggs in vitro with sperm from long-calling males and the other half with sperm from short-calling males. Offspring from long callers grew faster and survived better as tadpoles, were larger at metamorphosis, and grew faster after metamorphosis. This test strongly suggests that a long call is a sign of a healthy male with good genes, and that females who choose these males produce genetically superior offspring. The sensory bias model assumes that the evolution of sexual dimorphisms is driven simply by pre-existing biases in a female's nervous system, and those biases could be a byproduct of natural selection for some function other than finding mates. Suppose, for example, that members of a species had evolved a visual preference for red color because that preference helped them locate ripe fruits and berries. Red males would then have an advantage and a color dimorphism could evolve. Alternatively, females may also simply like novel features that somehow stimulate their nervous system. Also, in the sensory bias model, females derive neither direct nor indirect benefits from choosing a particular male.